Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy met with his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara on Tuesday, while top diplomats from Russia and the US held bilateral talks in Saudi Arabia to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. According to Associated Press, no Ukrainian officials were present at the meeting attended by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov and other senior officials, which came as the beleaguered country is slowly but steadily losing ground against more numerous Russian troops in a grinding war that began nearly 3 years ago. Zelensky said his country won't accept any outcome from this week's talks if Kiev doesn't take part. European allies have also expressed concerns they are being sidelined. In an interview with the Associated Press after the meeting, Rubio said both sides agreed to restore staffing at their respective embassies in Washington and Moscow to create missions to support Ukraine peace talks, bilateral relations, and cooperation more broadly.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you. How are you for invitation? How are you? Fine.
The Munich Security Conference was once more a scene for displaying Westerners' conflicts and special prioritization in international policy. While humanitarian and security crises are expanding across the world, the meeting once more showed that the main decision makers are more concerned about their own interests than global security. One of the main topics of the conference was the composition of the participants, which was mainly composed of Western countries and their allies. This issue has raised questions about the conclusiveness of the conference in reviewing the security challenges of the world. Focus on the Ukraine war, in the absence of a representative from Russia, was an indication of its one-sided outlook. Western countries at the conference once more emphasized the continuation of military support for Ukraine, while at the same time the US conditioned its support on economic concessions and the exploitation of the mineral resources of this country. In addition to this topic, the trade disagreement between the US and Europe was another main topic of the conference. The audience at the Munich Security Conference was expecting to hear about the Trump administration's plan to end the war in Ukraine, but instead were treated to a bombastic rejection of liberal orthodoxies that have prevailed in Western Europe since the Second World War, in a speech that downplayed the threats to the continent posed by Russia and China. BBC security correspondent Frank Gardner has listed 5 key takeaways from this year's Munich conference. 1. The era of international relations in its previous form is over. The security architecture that emerged in Europe after World War II no longer exists. America is still a member of NATO, but Europe can no longer automatically count on the US to come to its aid in the event of an external attack. 2. The policy of the majority of the world community towards Ukraine has been radically revised. The United States and Russia plan to reach an agreement to end the war in Ukraine, regardless of the attitude of Kiev and Europe as a whole to this issue. 3. You have to spend more now. European countries will need to increase defense spending as quickly as possible if they are to continue to contain Russia's growing aggression. 4. Vance's speech. US Vice President James David Vance's attack on European policy was seen as offensive by main conference attendees. However, many people on both sides of the Atlantic genuinely enjoyed Vance's speech, with Donald Trump even calling it brilliant. The threat that I worry most about vis-à-vis Europe is not Russia, not China, it's not any other external actor. What I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values. Vance told a stone-faced audience. Vance repeated the Trump administration's line that Europe must step up in a big way to provide for its own defense. The Ukraine war was mentioned, with Vance saying he hoped a reasonable settlement could be reached after US President Donald Trump's surprise announcement earlier this week that he and Russia's Vladimir Putin had agreed to begin peace talks. He alleged European Union commissars were suppressing free speech, blamed the continent for mass migration, and accused its leaders of retreating from some of its most fundamental values.